The morning sun crawled over the jagged peaks of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, spilling liquid gold, across the 400 acres of high desert scrub and grazing land that had been in the Miller family for 4 generations. I stood on the porch of the old ranch house, a chipped ceramic mug of black coffee in my hand, breathing in the scent of sagebrush and damp earth. My name is Silas Miller. I am a man of few words and even fewer patience for people who don't understand the concept of a boundary. My ranch, the Silver Creek Spread, was a pocket of wildness that had somehow survived the encroaching tide of luxury living flowing out from the city. To the north, a developer had recently finished the Cascades, a gated community of beige McMansions and manicured lawns that required more water than the desert could provide. I didn't mind them, as long as they stayed on their side of the survey pins. But then came Brenda. Brenda Vogel was the president of the Cascades Homeowners Association. She was a woman who lived for clipboards, bylaws, and the thrill of telling other people what color their curtains should be. She first appeared at my gate 2 weeks ago, wearing pristine white sneakers that had never touched real dirt and a visor that looked like a plastic halo. "Mr. Miller," she had said, her voice vibrating with the practiced friendliness of a shark. "We've been reviewing the local plat maps. It seems there is a significant discrepancy regarding the green space buffer between our community and your property." "It's not a green space, Brenda," I had replied, leaning against my fence post. "It's a ranch, and the discrepancy is that you're looking at it from the wrong side of the line." She hadn't liked that. She informed me that because my land bordered theirs, it was technically view-restricted communal assets, according to her HOA charter. She actually believed that because her residents could see my land, they had a right to use it. The conflict escalated 3 days later. I was out in the north pasture checking on a group of heifers when I saw a family of 4, the Cascades residents, setting up a picnic blanket right next to my watering trough. They had a golden retriever running off leash, chasing my stressed cattle. "Excuse me," I shouted, riding my horse Bo toward them. "This is private property. You're trespassing." The father, a man in a polo shirt tucked into khaki shorts, looked up with an annoyed expression. Brenda told us this was community-accessible land, part of the Silver Creek Nature Preserve project. "There is no nature preserve," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "There is only my ranch. Pack your things and leave before the cattle get spooked enough to trample you." They left, huffing about rude neighbors, but by that evening, I had a certified letter from Brenda. It was a formal notice of integration. In her twisted logic, she claimed that since the Silver Creek ran through both properties, the entire valley floor was community property under a local environmental easement she had supposedly discovered. She even had the audacity to suggest I remove my eyesore barbed wire fences so her residents could have unobstructed views and walking trails. I called my lawyer, an old friend named Elias who knew property law better than he knew his own children. "Silas," Elias sighed over the phone, "she's full of it. She's trying to adverse possession you by proxy. She wants to create a history of public use so she can eventually sue for an easement. If you let them walk on it, you lose it." "What do?" I asked. "Mark your territory." "Silas, clearly, irrefutably, and make it expensive for them to argue." The next morning, Brenda showed up again, this time with a surveyor she had hired, a young kid who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. They were standing 10 feet inside my property line. "Brenda," I said, walking up to them, "this is your final warning. Get off my land." "Mr. Miller, don't be archaic," she snapped, pointing to a map. "The community has voted. We are designating this section as the Silver Creek Common Link. We've already budgeted for a gazebo right over there by that old oak. The oak is on my land. The grass is on my land. Even the air you're breathing right now is over my land," I said. "If you don't leave, I'm calling the sheriff." "Go ahead," she smirked. "He'll tell you the same thing." In modern planning, community property overrides these dusty old deeds. "We're improving the value of your land, Silas. You should be thanking us." That was the moment I stopped being polite. I realized that to a woman like Brenda, a fence was just a suggestion. I needed something that spoke a language she understood. Liability and cold. Hard cash. I spent the next 48 hours in town. I visited the county records office, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the local electrical co-op. I discovered two very important things. First, my deed included an ancient agricultural protection clause that prohibited any residential development or communal use within 50 yards of my active livestock zones. Second, the Silver Creek was technically a protected riparian corridor, and the HOA's recent drainage project from their swimming pool was leaking chemicals into it. I didn't call the sheriff. I called a fencing contractor. On Monday morning, a flatbed truck arrived. By Wednesday, the eyesore barbed wire was gone. In its place stood a high-tensile, industrial-grade electric fence system. It wasn't just a wire. It was a professional-grade barrier designed for containing rogue bulls. It hummed with a low, menacing power. I also installed several large, high-visibility signs every 20 feet. They didn't just say private property. They said, "Warning, high-voltage livestock security system, active predator deterrent. Do not touch." But I wasn't done. I knew Brenda would try to sue to have the fence removed. So, I went to the county board. I filed a formal complaint regarding the HOA's illegal drainage into the creek. I also filed for a livestock protection variance, since the HOA had encouraged residents to bring dogs onto my land. I argued that my cattle were at risk of harassment and death by domestic canine. Under state law, a rancher has the right to take any and all necessary measures to protect their livelihood from roaming pets. On Thursday, I saw Brenda approaching the fence. She was leading a group of 3 other HOA board members. They looked like they were on a mission to tear down a poster. "Mr. Miller," she screamed from across the wire, "this is an outrage. This fence is a hazard. It's an ugly, dangerous monstrosity. You take this down immediately, or we will have it removed by the city." I walked to the fence, staying a safe distance from the live wires. I was holding a voltmeter. "Careful, Brenda. It's pushing about 9,000 volts. It won't kill you, but you'll see colors you didn't know existed." "You can't do this!" one of the other men shouted. "Our kids play near here." "Then I suggest you teach your kids about property lines," I said calmly. "Because according to the county, this isn't community property. It's a high-intensity agricultural zone. And since your HOA's pool runoff is poisoning my creek, I've had to cordon off this entire section for environmental remediation." Brenda's face turned a shade of purple that matched her expensive leggings. "We'll sue you into the ground. We have a legal fund." "Funny you should mention funds," I said, pulling a thick envelope from my back pocket. "Because you're standing on the answer to that. You see, when you built the Cascades, your developers diverted the natural runoff onto the north corner of my ranch. That caused erosion that cost me 3 acres of prime grazing last year. I've been quiet about it because I like peace. But since you want to talk about community property, let's talk about community responsibility." I tossed the envelope over the fence. It landed at her feet. "That's a formal notice of a lawsuit for environmental damages and land degradation," I continued. "My lawyer, Elias, has already filed it. We're asking for $300,000 in restoration costs. However, I'm a reasonable man." Brenda opened the envelope, her hands shaking. "What is this?" "That's a settlement offer," I said. "You sign an irrevocable easement waiver acknowledging my property lines. You pay for the installation of this electric fence, since it's only here to protect my cattle from your community. And you pay for a new water filtration system for the creek to fix the mess your pool made. You do that and I drop the lawsuit. If not, I'll see you in court. And I'll make sure the judge knows you were encouraging residents to trespass on a high-voltage agricultural site." "Brenda," the man next to her whispered, "the pool drainage? We knew that was an issue during construction. If he has proof, I have the soil samples and the water tests," I added with a smile. "Done by a certified lab." The aftermath was swifter than I expected. The HOA board went into an emergency session that night, faced with a massive environmental lawsuit and the liability of a high-voltage fence that their own president had provoked. The board turned on Brenda. They realized that her community property crusade was a legal suicide mission. 2 weeks later, I received a signed, notarized settlement. The Cascades. HOA officially recognized the Silver Creek spread's boundaries in perpetuity. They cut me a check for the fence, the environmental restoration, and my legal fees. Brenda resigned from the board shortly after. I heard she moved to a condo in the city where there are no fences, only concrete. I sat on my porch that evening, the sun once again dipping behind the mountains. The community property advocates were gone. The families from the beige houses stayed on their side of the line, watching the sunset from their own decks. I looked at the fence. It was still humming. It was a beautiful sound, the sound of a boundary respected. My cattle were grazing peacefully in the north pasture, no longer bothered by roaming dogs or picnickers. The ranch was quiet again. The land belonged to the wind, the sage, and the millers, just the way it was always meant to be. I took a sip of my coffee and smiled. Sometimes to keep the peace, you have to turn up the voltage.